وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد.
Firstly, I would like to like Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, لا يشكر الله من لا يشكر الناس. The one who does not thank the people, then he does not thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I thank you and the masjid for inviting me down for the khutbah as well as this lecture. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all of you. Secondly, I'm also going to apologize in advance. Straight after the lecture, I have to leave. I have to catch the train. So if anyone's got questions or anything, then I'm sure if you just pass it on to some of the guys in charge, and then I'll try to answer. Then you can get the answers from them, inshallah. Otherwise, if I miss this train, the next train after that is a 7-hour train because of the stops, and I'm not taking that one. The lectures, as you know, have been organized by the Markaz, and there's a series at the moment which is talking about the different rights. So the first one you had was the rights of the parents, the second was the rights of the children, and this lecture is regarding the rights of the relatives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like He says in the Quran, Surah Al-Hujurat, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. O mankind, verily we have created you from a male and female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. And we have made you into different tribes and nations so that you may recognize and know one another. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. Verily, the most noble of you with Allah, i.e. the best of you, they are the ones who have the most taqwa, the most fear of Allah, and the conscience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why even if you look at the Arabic language, the word insan itself, as the scholars of language, they say it's from the word anisa. Anisa ya'nasu unsan, which basically means that a person, when he's ya'nas, when he has that uns for another person, it means that he finds comfort in another person. So the nature of a human, even from the linguistic side, a person is called insan because naturally he is built in that way where he's living with other people, and if he's by himself, then generally there's an issue with that person. So we are living within our society with other people, and that's just the nature of humans and of mankind. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. But with living with others, it's not just merely interacting, but other people have rights over you also. And that's the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. That all of you are shepherds and all of you will be asked about your flock. I.e., all of you have some responsibilities, some things which you are in charge of, and you will be asked about these people. So, and the person gave a number of examples. So for example, the man, he will be asked about the father, he will be asked about his house, and the people that live in his house, i.e. his kids and so on. And the person gave another examples, and this can be used in any area of society, whether it's a job, whether it's a club that you have, or whatever it may be. If you're in charge of something, or in any situation where you have certain responsibilities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you about those responsibilities. And all of these responsibilities, they do differ. Some are more important than others. Rights differ. Some rights are more important than others. And generally speaking, the rights are split into three. The most important is the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. And that is singling Him out in worship. And then there's rights between you and the creation. And then there's rights between you and yourself. Your own body has rights, and so on. And we're focusing more on the rights with other people, and today's lecture is rights with the relatives. And with the rights of the relatives, the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith narrated in Bukhari, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir." Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, whoever has iman, whoever has some sort of belief, whoever is considered a mu'min, whoever considers himself a Muslim, فَلْيَصِلْ رَحِمَهُ. If that is the case, if he believes in Allah and he believes in the last day, then let him tie the ties of kinship. Let him keep those relations with his relatives. So notice how a condition for a person's iman, from this hadith, a condition of his iman is that he keeps these relations that he has. He keeps his relations and he does not cut them off. Hence, if you see a person cutting off these relations, then that shows that there is a deficiency in his iman. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in detail. And likewise, in another hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, أخبرني ما يقربني من الجنة ويباعدني من النار. O Messenger of Allah, tell me an action which will take me closer to Allah and further away from the hellfire. Give me that one action that will take me closer to Allah and further away from the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ said, تَعْبُدُ اللَّهِ لَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Worship Allah alone and do not commit any shirk with Him. And the explanation of this part, was khutbah today. وَتُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَتُؤْتِيَ الزَّكَاةِ, and establish the prayer and give the zakah. And I'm pretty sure that most of you have had many reminders regarding these two. And then at the end of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, وَتَصِلُ الرَّحِمِ, and to tie the ties of kinship, keeping those relations with one's relatives. It's from the best actions that can take a person closer to Jannah and further away from the hellfire. And just before we go into it, what do we mean by relatives? What's the definition of relatives? The reality of the matter is there's no technical definition. Relatives is who you consider relatives. Your cousins, your uncles, your aunties, your nieces, all of these are your relatives. So there's no need to be too technical that this person is. If it's considered your relative, everyone knows who the relatives are. They enter into the topic that we are talking about today. And obviously those who are more closer to you, they have more rights over those who are further away, and we're going to get to that point. Now this lecture, I'm going to split this lecture into 3 parts. I want everyone to pay attention because I'm going to test you at the end. And if any of you have attended my lessons before, they know that normally in the beginning of this next lesson, I test my students in the previous lesson. And if they don't know, I don't teach them that day, so they go reverse. Okay? So obviously, I'm not going to be that strict with you guys, but I'm going to test you guys at the end to make sure that you guys have, you've learned something. What's the point of coming to a lecture, listening and forgetting? So the lecture is split into 3 types. The first is that I'm going to mention 5 rights of the relatives. 5 rights of the relatives. The first part of the lecture, rights of the relatives, I'm going to mention 5 points. The second part of the lecture is the danger of cutting off the ties. The danger of cutting off the ties, and again 5 points. And then the third part of the lecture is just some extra points, miscellaneous points regarding relatives, and that's also 5 points. Okay, easy, 5, 5, 5, so nobody should get confused. And I'm going to test you on this at the end, inshallah. So the first part of this lecture is regarding the rights of the relatives. The first right that they have over you is that you are eager upon doing that which benefits them in this dunya and in the akhirah. You are eager upon helping them in that which benefits them in this world and in the hereafter. And this starts off with the basics of Islam. If a relative is falling into shirk, then the biggest right they have over you is that you go and you teach them that what they are doing is incorrect and that they should come back to Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, this is done with wisdom and so on, and there's ways to go about it, which we're going to talk about towards the end of the lecture. Likewise, if relatives are falling into innovations, their right over you is that you go and you rectify that innovation that they are falling into, and you teach them what is the actual sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then also everything else, anything which benefits them in their religion, whether it's a reminder, whether maybe a WhatsApp message, maybe he's sending a YouTube video, you help them in the dunya with money, with anything which will benefit them in this dunya, in the akhirah, that is their right over you. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, after giving secret da'wah for 3 years, so after the Prophet ﷺ gained revelation in the cave of Hira, for 3 years after that the Prophet ﷺ gave da'wah, but it was secret in Dar al-Arqam. It was secret. And then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He decided that this is the time to now go and make the Prophet's da'wah public, open. No more hiding, no more going at night to somebody's house and just making sure no one watches you. Go out in the open. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down the ayah, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, go and warn your close relatives. He warned them from the shirk that they are falling in. Ponder over the wording that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used. Allah didn't say go make your da'wah public. He said go and stand on Mount Safa and claim your da'wah and tell them such and such. Right, look at the wording. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. Go and warn your close family, your close relatives. And that's what happened. That's what the Prophet he went. He climbed Mount Safa and he went to the top. And we have the famous narration. The Prophet said that if there was an army behind me, would you believe me? And they said yes. Then he said, I have been sent by Allah to warn you from shirk, and so on. And then they rejected him. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya ma'ashara Quraysh, O the Quraysh. And then he said the same thing, O Fatima. And then he called this Auntie Sophia and a few other people. Call all of them individually, and to all of them, he said to all of them, Ishtaru anfusakum, la ughni ankum min Allahi shay'a. Go and buy yourselves, save yourselves from the hellfire. La ughni ankum min Allahi shay'a. I will not be able to protect you in any way, shape or form. So the Prophet clearly telling them that I'm not here to gain anything, no money, nothing. I'm here for your benefit, which is to save you and your families from the hellfire. So the greatest rights that your relatives have over you, firstly, is that you are eager upon that which benefits them in this dunya and in the akhirah. The second right is that you find out what state that they are in and help them if they need. So, if you have relatives, it's their right over you that every now and again you check up on them, how they're doing, if they are in need of anything. And if they are in need, if they are in financial need, then the fuqaha have mentioned that it's obligatory upon you if you're able to spend on that family. If your relatives, let's say your brother, for example. Your brother, he's considered poor, and you're considered a millionaire. It's an obligation upon you to spend on your brother. Obviously, if you're struggling yourself, slightly different issue. But if you're able and you're financially stable, and your relatives are in need, it's obligatory upon you to spend on them. And likewise, any other issue that they may have. So it's a right, their right over you that you go and you check how they're doing and help them if they need. And what do we mean by check up on them? This I'm going to talk about at the end of the lecture, inshallah. I'll mention a few general principles. But just for now, anything which we consider to be checking up on them. So nowadays, if it's a WhatsApp message, ikhlas, or WhatsApp messages is fine and it is sufficient. And I'll go into a bit more detail in regards to this towards the end of the lecture. The third right is that you love them and that you have mercy upon them. Because they are your relatives. So even if they have done certain things, then it's still their right over you that you have love for them. They're still Muslims. They have the right of being a Muslim brother as well as being a family relative over you. And because of that, you should have mercy with them in the way that you interact with them, even if they have done evil or bad to you. And that's why we move on to the fourth right, which is that you have patience upon their harms. You have patience upon their harms and anything that they do in any way, shape or form that harms you. And the virtues and the reward of sabr in of itself is a whole lecture. And there are many ayat and many ahadith which talk about the virtues of patience. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He rewards those who have patience without any accountability, i.e. without any restriction. That reward that a person gets for patience is unrestricted. So imagine how much reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give to that person. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are with those who are patient. And many other ayat. So having patience, in reality, the reality is that sometimes problems can occur with family members. That is, business problems and money problems. That happens a lot, and so on. Right? What does that mean? You've caused a problem, and that's it. You turn away from them and you completely shun them, and that's it. No, rather their right, even if they've done something wrong, their right over you is that you are patient upon them, and you continue. Giving their da'wah to them, and you continue trying to be good to them, and you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah guides them. And this is how the prophets were. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was stoned when he went to Ta'if. And then he was outcasted 3 years in the valley of Makkah. And then his own people, tried to kill him and threw him out. And then he was poisoned, and sorcery was done upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all of his children, apart from one, passed away in his lifetime. His wife Khadija radiallahu anha, in the hardest of times, she passed away. Now, how did the Prophet turn on? Did he say that, these guys have been too much, I'm going to give up? If the Prophet gave up, we wouldn't have Islam now. But the Prophet had that sabr, he had that patience. And he kept making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then look what happened in the 6th year after Hijrah. What happened? Or the 8th year after Hijrah, 10,000 Muslims walked into Mecca, and he conquered Mecca without dropping any blood. And look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to Islam after all of that hardship that the Prophet went to. So if that, I don't think anyone's relationship got to the extent where they're poisoning you and they're chasing you out of Newcastle and they are doing everything else. The prophets are the ones who are tested the most. So our trial and tribulations compared to them, most of in the general case, is a lot less. So it's upon us to have patience in regards to them. And generally, in life, the ruling of patience, somebody may ask, what's the ruling of having patience? In anything that I do, the ruling is that it is wajib, it is obligatory. Any situation that you are in, it is obligatory to have patience. And that's by ijma' of the scholars, consensus of the scholars. As for being happy and content with that as well, then that's mustahab, that's a level higher. So patience, that's obligatory. Then being content, that's mustahab and that's higher. And then being thankful also. So not even being content, but also thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the highest level that a person gets to. And as for doing at-tasakhut, which is having no patience whatsoever, and then saying stuff like, oh Allah, why have you done this to me, and so on, that's considered a major sin. So anyways, back to the topic, the fourth right that we have mentioned is that you have patience upon their harms. And this all leads to the last and final point which I'm going to mention, which is that you do not cut off, their right is that you do not cut off the ties with them. That's this kind of a result of the previous points that we have mentioned. So if a person has love for them and he is patient upon them, then that leads a person to not cutting off those ties with them. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, O Messenger of Allah, I have relatives, every time I try to tie these ties of kinship, they cut it off. And every time I be good to them, they be bad to me. And every time I am patient and forbearing with them, then they act in like an ignorant manner with me. So what should I do? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if the matter is like you're saying, so that's you're speaking the truth and that's how it is, and if you continue being good to them, then every time you're being good to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid you in all of your affairs, as long as you are patient upon this. You don't cut off that tie. And like we mentioned in the beginning, it's from the major sins to cut off the ties of kinship, and it's a sign of a person's deficiency in his iman. So these are 5 rights, and there's many more, but these are the 5 main rights, and some of the other rights can come under these 5 rights. I'll quickly just go over them one more time. The first is that you are eager upon benefiting them in that which benefits them in this dunya and in the akhirah. The second is that you ask about their state and you help them if you're able to do so. The third is that you love them and you have mercy with them. The fourth is that you have patience upon their harms. And the fifth is that you do not cut off the ties of kinship. So this is regarding the first part of the lecture. We move on to the second part of the lecture. What's the second part of the lecture? What's the second part of the lecture? The first part is the rights. The second is opposite.
Write them upon you.
No, that's the first. Their rights upon you.
Write you upon them.
No.
Cut them off.
That's just the same. Just swap it on.
Cut them off.
The dangers of cutting them off. Yeah. In other terms, the dangers of not fulfilling those rights and cutting them off. So it's basically the opposite of the first. And the reason I mention this is because these dangers, when we're going to mention some, we're going to mention 5 points. Person understands these ahadith that we mentioned, they realize how severe this issue actually is. And it's not something simple, this person's caused a problem. And I know I should, I know I should keep that relationship, but it's just so much easier for me to just, to blank them and just not see them. Okay, but when a person reads this ahadith, they realize the matter is not, it's not something small and like that. So the first point which shows the danger of this is that it is considered a major sin. And a major sin, a definition of major sin, is any sin where a specific punishment has been mentioned for it. That's a very short definition. Any sin, so if something is mentioned, this is a sin, that's just a normal sin. But if there is a sin and with it is mentioned a specific punishment, that they will get this in the hellfire, they will be tortured like this in the hellfire, or they will gain the anger of Allah and so on, then that is considered a major sin according to the scholars. And in this ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, فَهَلْ عَسَيْتُمْ إِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ أَن تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَتُقَطِّعُوا أَرْحَامَكُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ لَعَنَهُمُ اللَّهُ فَأَصَمَّهُمْ وَأَعْمَى أَبْصَارَهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, I've seen those people that cause corruption on the earth and they cut off the ties of kinship. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ لَعَنَهُمُ اللَّهُ. They are the ones who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has cursed. They're the ones who have gained the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This curse is a type of punishment, hence the ulama consider it a major sin. So cutting off their ties, it's not just, it makes my life easier. You gain the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing so. So that's the first point. It's considered a major sin because the person gains the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second is that not only is it a major sin, but it is from the worst sins that a person can do. From the most disliked actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes. Which is similar to the first point, but because of the wording of hadith, we separated it. And this is where, in a hadith, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, أَيُّ الْأَعْمَالِ أَبْغَضُ إِلَى اللَّهِ." Which actions are the most hated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the Prophet said, "Al-ishraku billah." Firstly, committing shirk with Allah. And then, قال قلت يا رسول الله. Then he said, "O Messenger of Allah, ثم ما?" After that, what? And the Prophet ﷺ said, ثم قطيعة الرحم. Then, cutting off the ties of kinship. So after shirk, the most hated and disliked action to Allah is cutting off the ties of kinship. And just as extra benefit, I've got a question for you guys, and we'll see how many of you are fuqaha and we'll work this out. Many ahadith, Prophet person asked a question. Okay, he's asked, which action is the best, for example? And one time the Prophet would say, being with your parents, one time he would say praying salah on time, one time he would say this, one time he would say jihad, one time he would say different ahadith, person was giving different answers. The question is the same, which is the best action? Or which is the most beloved action to Allah? And similarly, many times the Prophet mentions the worst actions, and generally shirk is first, but after that, in the hadith of the 7 major sins, shirk wa qatlun nafs, and killing is second. But here, second is cutting off the ties of kinship. It seems like it's a contradiction. How have the scholars combined between these ahadith? So why is, for example, one time saying this and another time saying something else?
Is it because of the individual? Because
Good.
I think there's a hadith from Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, where there was a person who intended to kill, and he said, "Will I be forgiven?" He said, "No, you will not be forgiven." So like
And then another person came who wasn't going to kill. Yeah. No. Okay, that's one answer. Okay, anything else? Any other answer?
It could be all the same level. All they are very, very high level.
Yeah.
So shirk billah, second, first. The second is cutting off with the relative, and qiyat al-rahim.
Yeah. It's a good answer. It's similar to one of the answers the scholars give. The only issue with that answer is that there's a difference between establishing the danger of something and then saying which is more worse. So I'll give you an example. So if we say we establish a virtue or something, we say that all of the Islamic sciences are virtuous, all of them have reward. We establish that they all have reward. But then the question is, which is the best Islamic science? So that's a better example. All of the prophets, we agree that all of the prophets are the best of people, and all of them, they all did their job properly and they conveyed the message. But then we have the question that we say the Prophet ﷺ is the best of messengers, and that doesn't take away from the station of any of the other prophets. We're just saying after the virtues have been established, which is the best after? After 100%, who has more than 100% basically in terms of numbers? So that's the only issue with that. But it's a good try. It's close. It's close to one of the answers. It's very close to one of the answers. Right, just for time. I'll just mention the two answers that you two are close to. The first is that it depended on the state of the person and the time and what was going on at the times of the Muslims. So for example, if the Muslims were just about to go into battle, the person would say, jihad is the best. If there's a person who never used to pray on time, the person would say, the best action is to pray on time. And like that. That's one answer the person gave, that's what you basically said. The second answer is very similar to what you said, which is the ulama give a hidden meaning, which is the word min, from. I.e., every answer the person would give is from the best actions is this, and from the best actions is this, and the person did not intend to say that this number one and this number two. All of them are from the best actions. All of them are from the best actions, and there are other answers the ulama give which you don't have time to go into. So that was the second, which is that it is from the most disliked and hated actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third danger of cutting off the ties of kinship is that it's also a means of hastening the punishment of Allah in this dunya as well as getting punished in the akhirah. So getting punished in the akhirah, that's kind of established because it's a sin. But not only that, it's a means of also being punished in this life. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ma min dhanbin ahra an yu'ajjil Allah li sahibihi al-'uqubata fi dunya." There is no other sin which is more likely to hasten the punishment of Allah in this world, مَعَ مَا يَدَّخَرُ لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ, as along with that which Allah has kept, that punishment Allah has kept in the akhirah, min قَطِيعَةِ الرَّحْمِ, from cutting off the ties of kinship. So it's not only will the person be punished in the akhirah, it's also a means of being punished in this world. The fourth is that it is cutting off the ties of kinship is a means of your actions not being accepted. So a person may think that, okay, I've shunned these guys, my life's a lot easier now, I can maybe focus on my ibadah more and so on. But by you doing that, it's a means of your ibadah not being accepted. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, إِنَّ أَعْمَالَ بَنِي آدَمْ تُعْرَضُ كُلَّ خَمِيسٍ لَيْلَةَ الْجُمْعَةِ, that the actions of the sons of Adam are shown to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every Thursday. فَلَا يُقْبَلُ عَمَلُ قَاطِعِ الرَّحِمِ, and when this happens, the actions of the one who cuts the ties of kinship will not be accepted. So whatever actions he's done throughout that week, when it's shown to Allah and also is shown that this person cut the ties of kinship, then that causes the good deeds that he did to be nullified and not to be accepted. The fifth and last point which I'm going to mention is it prevents a person from entering into paradise. And entering into paradise is something which everybody wants. And no, it's not just a want, it's the ultimate goal. And that anything that happens in this life, you always say to yourself that in the akhirah, I'll get the reward, and so on. So everyone wants to enter into Jannah. No matter what happens, there's some trials and tribulations they're going through. Say we have patience, we'll get rewarded for this in the akhirah. Everyone has Jannah in mind. But by doing this, it prevents a person from entering into Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said, لا يدخل الجنة قاطع الرحم, the one who cuts off the ties of kinship will not enter paradise. Narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. So from these hadith that we have mentioned, you can see that cutting the ties of kinship it's not a light matter. It's not something which should be shunned to a side, and something which is, just like a normal issue, just a little problem, no matter, life moves on. That's not the case. So just to repeat these five: firstly, it's a major sin because it gains the punishment of Allah. Secondly, it's from the most hated sins or actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third, it's a means of gaining the punishment of Allah in this world as well as the hereafter. The fourth is that it prevents a person's actions from being accepted. And the fifth, it prevents a person from entering into paradise. So, and with this we finish the second part of the lecture. Now we move on to the last part of the lecture, which was last part of the lecture.
How to maintain or keep up those relations and those kinship.
It was a good guess.
Yeah.
Eh?
Right the body has over you.
No. The first was the rights of the relatives. Okay, their rights. And this works both ways. So their rights over you, that's also your. So for example, their right over you is that you want good for them, and that which benefits them. Likewise, your right over them is they should have want good for you as well. So it kind of works both ways. That was the first, the rights. The second was the dangers of cutting off the ties of kinship. The last was.
Dangerous.
So that's the second, the dangers. Second of the dangers. You just did that.
Examples of problems.
Sorry?
Examples.
Not examples, just some extra points, extra miscellaneous points, general points and principles regarding relatives and their rights. And some of these are quite straightforward, so the ones which are straightforward I'm just going to kind of just whiz through them a bit quicker, and those that require a bit more explanation I'll explain them. The first point is that the rights of tying the ties of kinship, precedence is given to those who are the most closest of you, and then the closest after that, and then the closest after that. So I can't really think of an example. Let's say we're in some scenario where the rights are contradicting, and you have to choose basically to give the right of somebody who's close to you, maybe an uncle, dad's brother, mom's brother, or somebody who's further away, like a third cousin, for example. Right, in this case, they both have rights over you. Let's say, for example, they're both in need of money, and you won't have enough to help one of them. In this case, who do you give precedence to? Who do you give the money to? Who do you give it to? Do you give it to your uncle or do you give it to your third cousin?
The uncle.
You give it to your uncle because he is closer to you. And that's mentioned in Hadith of Prophet where he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُوصِيكُم بِأُمَّهَاتِكُم ثُمَّ يُوصِيكُم بِأُمَّهَاتِكُم ثُمَّ يُوصِيكُم بِآبَائِكُم ثُمَّ يُوصِيكُم بِالْأَقْرَبِ فَالْأَقْرَبِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises you with your mothers, and then your mothers, and then your fathers, and then the closest, and then the closest after that. And so on, narrated by Bukhari in his book, Al-Adab Al-Mufrad. The second point is that it is also obligatory to tie the ties of kinship with a disbeliever. So if you have a relative, parents, cousins, brothers, and they're non-Muslim, they're not Muslim, they still have the rights over you, the rights of relatives. They still have rights of relatives over you. And this is why Asma bint Abi Bakr radiallahu anha, Asma, daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu anha, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she came and she said regarding her mother, and the mother at this time wasn't, she didn't accept Islam. So she went to the Prophet and asked her, no, she's a mushrika, she's still doing shirk, she's not considered a Muslim. أَفَأَصِلُ أُمِّي, should I still keep the ties of kinship with my mom, even though she's not a Muslim? And the Prophet ﷺ said, نعم صِلِي أُمَّكَ. Yes, keep the ties of kinship with your mother. So if it is obligatory to keep those ties of kinship with a relative who's a disbeliever, then that just shows that how much more right a relative who is a believer, who is a Muslim, has over you. Because not only do they have the right of being a relative, they have a right of being a Muslim, a Muslim brother or sister also. The third is the third extra point. It goes back to one of the principles of the religion, and these principles are, it's this whole science. It's called Al-Qawa'id Al-Fiqhiyyah, which translates into English as legal maxims. And let's be honest, legal maxims, they're not words that people use. So what does legal maxims basically mean? It basically means that these are certain principles which have been extracted from the Quran and Sunnah, and sometimes they're the exact same wording as the hadith. Sometimes the wording is kind of slightly altered because it's a combination of a few hadith. And these principles can be applied in all of the different aspects of life and all the different aspects of fiqh. So, for example, I mentioned one famous al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak. Famous one. Certainty is not removed by doubt. It's a principle taken from many ahadith. This basically means that if you are certain about something and then you have a doubt regarding it, what do you do in that case? Certainty is not removed by a doubt, so you forget the doubt and you stick to that which you are certain. I'll give you an example. You have wudu. You know you've done wudu. Half an hour later you're like, have I broken my wudu or not? I don't know. I've got doubt. Right, applying this principle, what's the rule? Does the person have wudu or no?
He does.
Yeah, he has wudu. Why? Because he's certain he has the wudu. What's the doubt in? The doubt is that he has broken the wudu. So we don't look at the doubt and we take that which is certain. Right, opposite way around. Somebody knows he's gone to the bathroom, so he's not got wudu. And then he thinks to himself, late salah time comes and he thinks, I went to the bathroom, I know that, but did I do wudu as I was leaving? I can't remember. What's the ruling? Has he got wudu or not?
No.
No, he does not have wudu. Why? Because you stick to that which is certain. And likewise in tawaf, a person's done 6 and he's got shak, am I in the 7th or not? The ruling is that he is on the 6th. If there's a puddle of water outside and you see a dog near it, now rainwater is pure, a dog's near it, now you have doubt, did the dog go and lick it, did it not? What's the ruling of the water? It's pure. Because you have a doubt, the dog maybe didn't lick it. So the ruling, obviously if somebody comes and tells you, or you worked out through certainty from different means, then obviously you take that. So this is an example of a legal maxim in the religion. And this is taken from many hadith person. For example, the wudu one is taken from the hadith person where the person said, إذا جاء الشيطان إلى أحدكم في الصلاة. If shaitan comes to one of you to salah and he does wiswas, أخرج منه شيء أم لا, and he whispers to you that, you know, maybe you've broken your wudu or not, فلا ينصرف حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. A person should not leave that salah until he hears something or he smells something. I.e., when you have that wiswas that have I broken my wudu or not, that's from shaitan. You don't look at that doubt. If you hear something, then you know you've broken your wudu. If you smell something, then you clearly know you've broken your wudu. Then you have certainty, then you go do your wudu again. So this is one hadith, and that is how ulama have extracted that ruling. Right, so in regard, that's just an example of a legal maxim. In this case, the legal maxim which I want to focus on is something known as al-'ada muhakkama, which is the customs of the people are taken into consideration. Right, my watch has died. What time is it?
55.
8:55.
55.
8:35.
Right. I'll try to finish in 5 minutes. So the principle in regards to what we're talking about today is a principle known as al-'ada muhakkama. Al-'ada muhakkama. That the customs of the people are taken into consideration. The customs of the people are taken into consideration. Now this principle has a number of conditions for it to be used, but I'm just going to focus on the main ones. This principle basically means in those issues where the religion has left open, has not described the technicalities of the issue. So for example, salah, clearly, you know, everything's been described. You start, you say this, and then you go to the ruku', you say this on the ruku', you come up, you say this, you go down, you say this. It's not left open. It's something which has clearly been mentioned how to do, and you have to follow it step by step, and you can't add anything from yourself. But issues, so for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says regarding wives, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them with goodness. Live with them with goodness. Right? What does goodness mean? Does it mean you got to take them out every single day? Take them shopping every single week? What's goodness? We say the meaning of goodness, we apply this principle, al-'ada muhakkama, the customs of the people are taken into consideration. So the customs of the people of that time and of that place, and if it's certain issues, the class of people, that you take into consideration. And this can differ from time. Something which is considered the norm 100 years ago, it's different to now. That which is considered the customs in Pakistan is different to customs in England. Custom in England is different to customs in Saudi, for example. That's why to give a general answer is not allowed. A person, when he's giving a Islamic ruling, a condition is that he has to be knowledgeable regarding the affairs of the people and their customs. Otherwise he's going to give a fatwa and he's going to be incorrect in them. So if let's say, use the same example of the wives, if somebody's from like a middle class, for example, whatever type of house is normally given, whatever, you know, how many times generally that community take to take the woman out, for example, whatever's the custom of that time, yeah, and it could may even be different from Newcastle to where I'm from, I don't know. But generally the customs of people is taken into consideration. So if a wife does turn around and say, I want you to take me out every single day, yeah, it's not right, you have to take care of me. Allah says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. You have to be good to your wives. You be good to me, I want to go out to eat, I want to go shopping every single week. Yeah, I want to go here, I want to go on there, I want to go. You say no, you can't just use the ayah like that. The principle is you go back to the customs of the people. And the customs of people of this is that you don't go out every single day, maybe you go once a week or whatever it is, just an example, you apply that. So likewise here. Likewise in regards to relatives, what is considered, so when you talk about previously, what is considered keeping the ties? How do you check up on people? So if nowadays it is just sending a WhatsApp message, it's not just sending a WhatsApp message. Maybe in Pakistan, I know like the village in Pakistan where I'm from, it's not WhatsApp messages, like they actually go to people's houses. They go on a day-to-day basis and they go to different houses, right? So there, WhatsApp message isn't enough to do that. And that if you just think that, yeah, I can just do that, then you're deficient and you're incorrect in that. Because the customs of people are different. But in England, going to people's houses is difficult. Everyone's working, people are at home, you got a message from before and so on. So the customs are different. So whatever the customs of people is in terms of keeping connection, you apply that. Likewise, what is considered being good to your relatives, the customs of the people is applied in that. And this is how you can give a general answer. Now obviously each scenario, especially if there's issues and so on, will differ. And I can't give a general answer for that. Every scenario, especially when there's like serious issues, they have to be looked into and you can't just give a general answer. And my advice is always go to your local imam. Especially if that local imam is not a young guy like me, but somebody who's got a lot of years of experience in dealing, because a lot of people don't see this, but the imam actually does a lot behind closed doors. A lot of family problems, a lot of divorces he sorts out. My dad's an imam, so I've seen a lot of people keep coming to the house and they have these problems. So the imam understands what the people are going through. He knows how they think, and especially if he knows your family, he'll be even better to give advice in regards to that. Anyways, that's point number 3. Point number 4 is that true tying the ties of kinship is tying those ties when your relatives actually cut you off. So you can talk about tying the ties of kinship, and in terms of ease, when everyone gets along, then it's easy. It's no problem. But the actual struggle is when they cut you off. Do you have that patience? Do you continue be good to them? Do you continue trying to keep that relationship with them? That's what the Prophet ﷺ said in Bukhari. ليس الواصل بالمكافئ ولكن الواصل الذي إذا قطع رحمه وصلها. That al-wasil, the one who keeps these ties, is not the one that when he does it, they smile back at him, they give him a gift back and they're happy. No, rather the one who truly keeps the ties of kinship is the one who keeps them when everyone else is cutting it off from them. So that's just a point just to keep in mind, that when you are in a situation and your relatives are cutting you off, that's where this lecture, that's when it actually comes into play. That's when the actual trial and the actual test comes. Otherwise, when everyone's meeting each other, then it's easy. There's no difficulty in that. And then this is the last point which I want to mention, is that this whole lecture in of itself just shows the beauty of Islam. How Islam is not just a narrow religion just looking at it from one aspect. Rather, it's a holistic religion. It looks at it from all different aspects. It looks at every affair of a person from all different aspects, from financial aspect, from his spiritual aspect, and also from the family aspect. And the Prophet ﷺ has explained, and the Quran has clarified these issues. And that's what Abu Dharr radiallahu anhu, he said that there's not even a bird in the sky that is flying except that the Prophet ﷺ taught us some knowledge regarding it. The Prophet ﷺ told us something regarding that bird. Okay, whether it's halal to eat or not, something the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned it. And that's what Allah Ta'ala said, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Today I've completed your religion. It's completed. Everything has been clarified. And with this, I conclude my lecture. What's left is your test. So quickly, right?